Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and this is the first garden tour video of the year, brought to you by Vessi Seeds. Vessi Seeds provided all the seeds for my garden this year, with the exception of a handful of things that I saved from the year before. Everything's provided by them, just like last year. I had a great garden last year. I hope to have a good garden this year. It's April 7th, 2019 as I film this right now. We had snow yesterday and frost this morning, and it's still getting some cold nights. We had, I think the coldest night this past week was -5 Celsius. So we're not, spring isn't, this isn't an ideal spring. We didn't have the most ideal kind of winter. The ideal kind of winter is, at least in this part of the world, is it starts snowing in December and the snow stays on the ground all winter and then it melts in the spring. We didn't get that kind of winter here. We got snow, then rain, then freeze, and snow, then rain, then freeze. And in my experience, those are the worst kinds of winters because the ground gets really, really icy and frozen. And just about, with the exception of the beds that have domes over them, just about every bed here, even though the top inch or so, in some of these beds, it's basically ice right at the top, still, April 7th. But in other beds, it might be thawed down 3-4 inches, and then it's ice. And I tried doing a video with a pickaxe last weekend or the weekend before that. I was trying to pick down to see how far the ice went, but I was fighting off a cold and I just didn't have a lot of energy, and to tell you the truth, I just couldn't, I couldn't get, it was too hard. I just could not, it was like picking concrete. I could not get through. I certainly didn't have the vitality that weekend to persevere. But anyway, we're gonna do a garden tour video. Come along, have a look with me, and let's see what's going on. I got a few things going on in the garden. Let's have a look. All right, so here we are at the beginning, the entrance. Actually, got a couple branches on the ground here because we've had so much wind lately. It's knocking the branches off the trees. But anyway, these beds are hugelkultur beds, and they are still frozen to a large extent. If you probe into the soil, there's still there are different degrees of freezing. These bags, I set these bags down, these leaf bags, in December. And they froze in place, and they're still frozen in place. I can't. At some point they'll thaw out, but they are frozen in place, and so there they shall remain. And this is just all the bags that I had over those compost tent gardens that I did last fall. I'll reuse these in various ways over the course of the growing season, or just bury them in trenches or whatever. This bed here is still frozen. I should get a pointy stick, sort of probe a little bit here. See? Still frozen. Basically all the beds that didn't have plastic over them are frozen, and to varying degrees the ones with plastic have thawed. I don't know that things have started to, this garden here I planted parsnips last fall. I don't really know that they've begun to germinate yet under the plastic. I just put this plastic on about a week ago. So if anything's happening in there, I don't really, oh yeah, look. There's a parsnip. See, no, that's just that's just a spruce bough. Yeah. So yeah, if anything's happening here, it's not happening yet. It's going to be a little while before anything happens here. Need some more heat. The ground's still, well, it's thawed a bit. It's thawed down. Yeah. No, things should happen soon. Over here in this bed, I planted Swiss chard. I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember now. This I sowed kale last fall. We'll pop that up and have a look. Over here I sowed arugula a week or two ago. Over there I sowed I think lettuce. I'm trying to go from memory here. I think this one's lettuce and that one's onions, and over there is beets. So let's just have a look at these ones for now. That's basically, aside from the cold frames, that's the only real action going on here. I did sow some parsnips over there, but let's have a look at these and see if anything's popped up yet. All right, let's take a look in here and see if there's anything going on. Pop this thing off. Yeah. Despite the fact that it's been cold at night, I do see what I believe is some early signs of Swiss chard growing in this garden. Let me bring the camera in and show you. So if you look right here, you can see a little shoot coming out. There's another one right here. Right, so and so on and so forth down the garden. So I don't know if they're growing everywhere, but I do see the beginnings of the Swiss chard starting to show up. Right, you can see here. Right, I assume that's Swiss chard. I mean, it's pretty uniform. There's one there. There's one there. There's one there. I plant in, something resembling a line. So I assume those, and they're all similar looking. So I assume they're not weeds. I'm sure there's going to be some weeds come up, but yeah, I'm going to assume that they're Swiss chard and they have germinated. And that's despite the fact that when I planted the Swiss chard in this garden, it was not completely thawed. I think there was some freeze deep down beneath the soil. It may still be, but it doesn't matter. It'll keep thawing out below. And where these roots are is thawed, and they're tough and they can handle cold soil, so it's okay. Just keep them covered like this. And so despite the fact, I think it was like one night this week was -5 Celsius, and certainly it was cold last night. We got frost. Everything here was covered in ice. You can still see some remnants, right? We got snow yesterday. Had a good, almost like a snowstorm yesterday. There's some remnants of the snow, and everything was frosted up this morning. All of these all this plastic had frost on it. Anyway, Swiss chard definitely has begun. All right, let's have a look at this. So this is kale that was sowed last fall, and I don't know that it's come up yet. I just put the plastic over these beds fairly recently, so I think the soil still has some warming up to do. I don't really see any signs of life. It seems to have thawed. Probe down. Soil's thawed at the top. But I find kale seems to like to be a little bit warmer than Swiss chard for germination. Oh, there's one right there. There's actually, yeah, that is definitely kale. Germinated kale. So we'll see what happens. We'll just keep an eye on it. But there's not a lot going on here. I'm not going to bring the camera in. There's another one. Okay. Yeah. So there is the earliest signs of kale. And this was sown last November. I really got to do more of that. There's one right there. I find that when you sow things in the fall, the seeds that actually make it through and retain their viability into the following season tend to give you great results. There's another one right there. Yeah, let me bring the camera in and see if I can get an angle on that. Come on now. Oh, don't be like that. There, let's do that. Okay, let's bring this thing in here. Yeah, see if I can show you that. Show you what I'm looking at. So right there. I don't know how visible that is. That little thing looks like a 4-leaf clover. That's definitely kale, or it's certainly of that family. All this family, this mustard or cole or whatever you want to call that family, brassica, all the kale type things tend to look the same when they're little like that. So there's one there. There's another one right there. See that? So I mean, it's growing. And this bed was frozen hard a couple weeks ago. I mean, really frozen. So it just goes to show that the plastic seems to be working. I'll have to be careful to remove this loose stuff here really soon, maybe today. Anyway, the kale is definitely up. Over here, look at that now. So in this bed, I don't know if you can see through the plastic, but I planted a arugula a couple weeks ago. And it's not coming up everywhere. Yeah, it's got something, there's trees over here, which creates a lot of shade. But there's definitely, I lift this thing, come on now.
There you go. Definitely arugula there under the glass. Right. Let's have a look here. So this is that I plant here. Lettuce, I believe. So we got, let's see. I think I planted lettuce and something else. Two different things. I can't remember now what they were. One of them's lettuce, like a, I can't even remember what variety of lettuce. And the other rows were some other green like that. And you can see that they've come up too, right? I'd have to go back to the original video. I just can't remember, sorry. But it's a kind of lettuce is what I planted here. A really tough. I might have interplanted rows of lettuce and spinach perhaps. This was the first bed I sowed here, right here. This was the first thing I sowed this year. And lettuce and spinach is usually the first thing I sow because I just find them to be really tough. So yeah, not every row seems to have them, but there's certainly some right there. All right, so I mean, yeah, it's coming along. We got lettuce, we got a heartbeat, we got lettuce. This bed I sowed onions 2 weeks ago. So let's see if we got anything going on there. I don't really see any. I find onions are a bit slower to germinate. This whole bed is onions, different kinds. I see a shoot there, but that's probably a weed. I don't really see any sign of onions growing here yet. So we'll just wait a little longer. This I just sowed last week and we didn't have a lot of heat. So I doubt, this is beets, but I don't think anything's happening there. In this bed, I planted parsnips a couple weeks ago. Let's see if there's any parsnips happening here. All right, this is hard to do while you're holding the camera. So sorry for the shaky camera work. Needs to be watered a bit. I don't see any signs of life here. I'll give this a good watering today. I water these things under these domes about once a week. But yeah, definitely sowed parsnips here. Don't see anything growing, but that's just a matter of patience. Over here is where I sowed peas last weekend. I don't expect them to be poking through the ground yet or anything. It's a bit early, but I thought it'd be neat to just poke around a bit and see if the ground here is even got a. Okay, it's that cold that it is frozen into a crust, even under the plastic. Anyway, there's a pea. Let's see if it's done anything. Not really. Don't see any signs. Maybe today. Maybe today's the day. We didn't have a lot of sun this past week, and as you can see, it's been getting cold. So the seeds, I imagine, are still viable. Anyway, I was hopeful I'd have something, but we had a number of days where it was overcast and it was cold and there was no sun. So maybe it'll take another week for the peas to get started. Anyway, I'm still confident this will totally work. All right, so here we got the cold frame. This cold frame is where I sowed spinach last October. First week of October, I sowed spinach here. And it grew a little bit, and then from some point in November onward, just nothing happened. It didn't die, but it didn't grow. And it probably started growing, a few weeks ago, like early March, I would say. We started getting enough light during the day. So it is growing, right? So so you saw the garden back there where I just sowed spinach. It's just germinated, whereas this is far ahead of that. So there is an argument to be made for a fall sowing of spinach. And I'm assuming this isn't going to bolt. Certainly this, despite, it's pretty far north here and it gets pretty cold here, you can tell my kale, all the kale that's in the garden beds just died, right? I mean, we get a pretty relatively harsh winter, although, colder zones get colder winters. But anyway, this spinach survived the winter, and it is growing now, and it is well ahead of the spinach I sowed the last week of March. So yeah, definitely proof of concept, definitely works, and I will do this more next year. But you know, the idea that you're going to sow it in October and eat it all winter is nuts, because it didn't do anything. But certainly a good way to get ahead. I mean, we'll see how these spinach do and what they turn out to be. But I'm optimistic. I mean, looks good to me. Right? These are, just to give you a sense of scale, right? There's my thumb. Right? So I mean, you know, probably almost an inch and a half long by an inch wide. Good size for this time of year. In here I got a bed where I had I moved kale from other beds into this garden to overwinter, so that I could save the seeds from it. For some reason in my garden, kale does not survive the winter, and I cannot leave it in a regular bed to have it go to seed the following. Kale's a biennial plant, but kale tends to die in my garden over the winter here. I don't know if it's because of the cold or because of how wet and icy the soil gets here. But definitely some of them, like this one, is still alive, right? So, but this one's clearly dead. This one, even though it was in a cold frame with light and a reflector and all this other stuff, right? A little reflecting surface here. It still died with all this protection. But this one made it, right? And this one made it, so I'll save the seeds from those. Now, I won't leave them in this cold frame. As soon as I can work my soil, right now a lot of the gardens are still frozen up really good. I will take these out of here and move them into another place in the garden so I can use this cold frame properly. Right? I don't want to grow kale in here. And you know, when kale like this grows, you're really not growing it for the greens. You're growing it for the seeds. It's not the best tasting at this stage in its life, and it's going to go to seed. It'll create this huge plant that makes almost like bean pod type things. But anyway, it's definitely, this is the only way I can seem to overwinter a kale in my garden. I had one plant survive a winter because it was under plastic for a winter, and this was like 3 years ago. And I saved the seeds from that, and I've gotten really good results from that. So this is a baby of that plant, and I didn't want the seeds to lose their viability. I wanted to get a new batch of kale seeds from that. And the last bed. I had, for those that haven't followed along, I had Swiss chard growing over here, and something just ate it right down to the ground and killed it over the course of the winter. I had moles in here, and I trapped and killed maybe 4, and then I haven't caught anything since then. I doubt the moles were eating the Swiss chard. Everything I understand of moles, they're carnivores, but I haven't been able to catch anything else in the traps. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that. These got chewed down. These were parsley. They have come back. I mean, I planted these here. I moved them into this bed so that they could overwinter and go to seed this year. So I'm growing these just for the seeds. I'll move these out of here and put them somewhere else so I can use this cold frame as a proper cold. I use my cold frames like greenhouses. I use them to start things early. And today, this weekend, probably is a good time to get some things planted in here. In terms of perennials, I have a rhubarb planted right here. That's usually my first perennial. I'm not too optimistic about my perennials because a lot of the soil is still frozen. But let's have a look. Well, see a bit of color there. See that? And yeah, I can see a bit of color. So I mean, this is usually my first rhubarb. I don't think it's a variety. I think it's just because it's like against the south-facing wall. That way, this way is south. So I see a bit of color in here, right? So this will probably be doing something in about a week. So that's a good sign. That's where this is my earliest and first rhubarb usually. So wherever you are, if you want to know where I am relative to you, that's the stage my best rhubarb's at. I got another bed over here with rhubarb. Let's have a look at that. Let's just take a quick look around at the perennials to give you a gauge of that. This garden's sort of mid-production. I was doing a big thing, putting all these beds in last fall, and then everything froze and I lost the season. So that's why it looks like a mess, because everything is kind of frozen in place. Anyway, this is a rhubarb bed. Rhubarb here tends to come in later than the other rhubarb, and I don't see much signs of life here at all, really. And I mulched it, so the rhubarb's got to find its way through the mulch. But I mean, it's frozen. Everything's frozen. There isn't a lot of mulch on here, but the soil's still pretty much, yeah, I can't get in there. Still needs to thaw out. So this rhubarb is not coming up at all. Not much budding action here on the grapevines. Strawberry beds. This is a strawberry bed. Still frozen. I mean, really, they're still, yeah, the ground's still frozen. I mean, you can see some green if you dig down, and look, you can see it looks like new growth here. You see that? That's new growth. But I don't know why it's growing. The ground's frozen, so I'm just going to leave it like it is. And you know, someone was asking me about that. Do you move the mulch aside or whatever? With strawberries, I just leave everything the way it is, and when they're ready, they find their way through. They always do, and that way you'll get less weeds. If you just leave that mulch on nice and heavy, you know, you cover it in the fall and it finds its way through. The plants that are still strong and viable will find their way through on their own. Just leave it and let them figure it out. Another sense of another gauge of where my garden is relative to yours. This bed here is a garlic bed. I think I got like 90 garlic planted here, and I see one. That one's found its way through, but this is still frozen. Everything's frozen here. So yeah, I think it's going to be another week or so before you see any signs of life with this garlic. Same with this. This is strawberries. And this is strawberries. There's really not, you know, if I move back the straw, you can see a little bit of green, but the strawberry is kind of an evergreen. The leaves will stay green all winter under cover anyway. So I really don't think the strawberries are growing in any appreciable way right now. Outside the garden, I've got this bed here is a garlic bed, and I don't see anything growing here at all. And this is a garlic bed, and I don't see anything growing here at all. So just to give you a sense of where all that is, I you know, even in this province where I live, I've got people that I work with, and their garlic's up already, and mine hasn't even begun. You know, the people that live an hour's drive from me got their garlic maybe 2-3 inches high, and my soil's still frozen, and the garlic hasn't even begun to grow. So, you know, there's a lot of variance in an area, a lot of different kinds of microclimates. So yeah, my garlic has got nothing going on yet. For those people that just want to compare notes, if you want to see the state of buds, that's where my apple trees are right now. That sort of state. I did a bit of pruning. I was going to film it, but I just had a ridiculously windy day, and I had to prune. I had to get at it. So another year where I didn't do a pruning video. Oh my! But anyway, we've always got wind here. Yeah. So I mean, I got different varieties of apple tree, but that's what those buds look like right now. Now, I'm just doing this for the sake of people that want to compare, you know, the state of their growing conditions to mine, right? That's, if you got apple trees, compare your buds to mine. It's just a good gauge of where things are in terms of the growing season. Another perennial here, this lovage plant. I've done videos on it. It's a great plant if you live somewhere where it's difficult to grow celery. This is a celery plant, but it's perennial, and it's usually one of your earliest, fastest growing perennials. This grow like 6 feet high, right? 5-6 feet high. So this is normally an early perennial. It hasn't even begun to grow. I don't think it died last winter. I just think it's not. Oh, look, there's a little. Yeah, I see a little shoot there. The beginnings of something, anyway. Anyway, this hasn't you know, when this starts to grow, it grows really fast. It's kind of an amazing thing to have. One of the first things I have, I'll make a rice dish and use this in it to get that celery taste. I probably go a little too heavy on it, but anyway, if you see one of these in a garden store, and usually you get it as a transplant for $2-3, stick it in the ground, you'll have basically celery for the rest of your life. This is asparagus. I planted asparagus here last year from seed, and these are just the dead plants from the previous year. There's nothing happening yet in terms of asparagus. So if your asparagus is up, mine ain't. I gotta actually cut these off, but anyway, asparagus isn't doing it. This is still frozen. I got nothing to show you here, but it's you know, still a good amount of freeze in this soil. So it's gonna be a while before I think. I don't know. We'll check next week, but nothing really happening with the asparagus yet either. I've got more established asparagus perennials in these beds, and I don't see any signs of life here either. So yeah, asparagus is still not happening.
Anyway, thought I'd just take you around and give you a look at where the garden is right now. We are still shaking off the winter, and I got a lot of thawing left to do, and I predicted that. We didn't have a lot of snow this winter until quite late in the season, which is the worst thing possible. And whenever we have a winter where there's not a lot of snow, it still gets cold. We get rain instead of snow, and then lots of cold nights. The ground freezes really deep, and it delays the start of the growing season, which is why I have so much plastic in my garden to work around that in this particular microclimate. But another week or so, things will start to thaw out, and we can get some more things going. But anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.